Okay, today we are looking at your spiritual reset. And we have a picture of a green button that we can push to reset the world. It would be interesting if we all had one of those, and where would we be if we all pushed it? What world would we bring back? And it's something we could probably no more agree on than we are in agreement at this stage. We all have different viewpoints, different ways that we're experiencing the world, but we all do have our own personal reset button. And that's what we're going to look at today. It's your button may not look like mine, and it may not reset in the same way. But as I pointed out, the world is turning all the time. It is changing all the time. And we seem to have this hope that the more we learn spiritually, the more we'll be able to influence how the world changes and influence those actual changes. And the truth is that probably will never happen. But there is a way to deal with it, and we're going to look at that today. Henry David Thoreau was a man full of wisdom. He was also a great rebel of his day. But the feeling of being stuck in life is probably one of the most common expressions of frustration. And the likely reason Henry David Thoreau wrote this famous line, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation." And I don't know if I would go that far to say that the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation, but certainly all of us frequently look out at our life experience and say we wish something was different. We wish things weren't this way. And you can call that a quiet desperation if you want, but it's there's something in us that wants to reach a point where we're okay with the world. And what we have to realize is that we're never going to make a world that we're okay with. We don't have that ability. And even something as simple as climate change, people are starting to think that we can control the climate, but we can't. And records show, that it goes back thousands and thousands of years that the climate has never been under our control. That things happen in ways that we have no control over. The sun changes, different things happen. We can influence things, but we're responsible for our own choices. But life is like the climate. It is something that is happening, and there are so many factors involved that we can't control, that we have no control over, that we don't even understand. And to hope that we're going to reach a point where all of that stops changing at some point because of our spiritual insight, that's not going to happen. What can happen, though, is that we learn to see it differently. We learn to experience it in a new way. And so that's the message that we keep putting out there. It's not about changing the world. It's about changing the way that we are choosing at this moment to experience the world. And we're all given the opportunity to look at that, to decide how we're going to deal with whatever's going on in our life right now. And again, there's quite a strong school of thought, I guess, that how you think will cause things outside to happen differently. And there are times, of course, when that is true. But more often than not, it's life presents itself, and then we decide how we're going to respond to it. Either we're going to let it pull us down, or we're going to be strengthened by the change or by the unexpected thing that we're seeing. So if you put that in perspective, the ball is always in our court. We're not going to create a better world. Why not think that the world as it is perfect for each one of us? And that sounds ludicrous to say that the world is perfect for each one of us, because maybe we don't like what we're seeing. Maybe we don't like this world. But what does it mean to be perfect? What does it mean for the world to be perfect for us? It means that we live with the awareness that that which constitutes our personal peace of mind, has never been taken away. Now, we may decide that this thing that's happening can take away our peace of mind and we can give up our peace of mind. But if we hold to the idea that this thing has no power over my own peace of mind, that I will maintain my peace of mind, then we will move through whatever it is that we have to do to deal with, to get through it in a stronger way. And this is spiritual responsibility. It's a responsibility not many people are willing to take. I'm not willing to take it always. I would rather respond to something that I don't like and say I don't like it, and here's why. And so but I have the choice then of not liking it. And Jesus talked about judgment, that we judge according to the way we're judged. We're judged according to the way we judge. And what that means is, if I decide I don't like this thing and it's going to have a negative impact on me, that's my judgment, and I'm being judged by that judgment. In other words, I'm having the level of experience that I set for myself. Is there another level of experience available to me? If we live in an infinite universe, if my soul is eternal, if I'm an infinite being, the answer always is yes. Do I want to make another choice that allows me to experience greater freedom in this thing I don't agree with? That's always the question. And that's where we learn to take a deeper look at these spiritual principles. Either God is available at all times or God is not. And if God is not available at all times, that means I'm operating from a paradigm of separation. I'm separate from my good. If I have embraced the paradigm of oneness, where God is always present, then that means there's always a way to experience whatever pops up. And it may take me a long time to adjust to that, to understand that I can either suffer through it or I can find my center of strength. We say it's easier to suffer through it sometimes, just to have the normal reaction. And maybe it is easier to choose that path, but in truth, it's really easier to not choose it, because look at the quality of your experience. Is that what you want to have? And, again, why do we study this stuff? Why do we read these books? Why do we expose ourselves to a philosophy that says life can be better right where we are? Not because we're able to change circumstances, but because we're able to change the way we experience them. So in that sense, the ball is always in our court, and that's a very difficult thing to remember. That's why so many people would not even consider entertaining this type of thinking. The mainstream Christian is waiting for a second coming so that hoped for kingdom can be ushered in by somebody else. And that the problems that we have now will be solved, not because we change our thinking, but because we have walked the straight and narrow, that we have stayed in a kind of thinking that says we're saved. We'll be saved from the problems of that. So we can think that way, and we're putting our hope in the future, and it's a future that we will never reach. We'll never arrive there. So the question is, why are we studying these things? We want to make this life better, not some life in the future. And I think that's why Jesus treated the kingdom of God as a present reality. The question was asked of him, when will the kingdom come? It's a projection. What day of the year? What year will the kingdom show up? And he said it doesn't come that way. It's already here. It's within everybody. As Thomas says, the kingdom of the Father is spread out upon the earth, and men do not see it. But because we don't see it, we built a whole religion around a futuristic experience. And so we have to ask ourselves, are we going to follow the traditional teachings, or are we going to listen to Jesus, to one who had the insight to know we're talking about not something that comes through observation, but something that comes through internal experience? The kingdom of God is within, and that means it's always within our reach. So it's not a question of when, it's a question of how. How do we open ourselves to that? How do we do a spiritual reset? We like action. We like to initiate changes, see results, and go on to the next thing with the feeling that our life is progressing. Sometimes we initiate changes, nothing happens, or everything seems to go wrong. Nothing appears to work, and we feel as if we're floundering. And I think that there's no better example of that than what I've been describing as the closing or the sale of this property. You know, it's like there should have been a culmination of the whole thought around it a long time ago, but it keeps being pushed off. So how much of life happens that way? We initiate something and we expect certain results, and those certain results don't happen. So what do? Do we say life must not work? Something's wrong. If you believe that your life is an expression of your every thought that you hold, then you're going to say, where did I think negatively? What did I do to bring this on? And so I can go back through my thinking. I can try to do some kind of an inventory to see where I had negative thoughts, one time, or had a negative reaction, or maybe I'm not experiencing forgiveness. For some reason, I caused that thing to happen that way. Well, what if that's not true? The only thing we cause is our reaction. That's the thing we cause. And there's a statement in Unity, thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. Produce what? Thoughts held in mind produce what after their kind? As I point out in one of my books, they produce more thoughts. They don't necessarily produce conditions. They produce more thoughts. And so thoughts held in mind, I'm thinking I'm responsible somehow for this thing not working out. And so I do an inventory on how could I have possibly gotten it off track? Well, I'm producing more of those kind of thoughts by doing that, rather than saying, let's start again. Let's not do that connection. And I'm going to get a lot of pushback on that kind of statement, because that's a very common thought in the whole new thought arena, is that how we think determines the conditions in our life. But how we think determines how we think. And how we think is our life. That's what we experience. We experience what we think and what we feel. And these are choices we're making at this very moment. If we got every single condition, if every single condition was a result of something we thought, how many people do you think you'd be responsible for hanging, shooting, butchering, breaking their necks? You would do a lot of damage if every thought that you thought manifested. And vice versa, every good thought you had would also come forth. But it would probably look a whole lot like your life looks right now. But thoughts held in mind produce more thoughts after their kind. And that's what we want to get off of. What did I do wrong? What did I do to deserve this? That's a kind of thought that will produce more thoughts of the same kind. So we want to do a spiritual reset. That's the point I'm trying to make here. We want to break that chain of logic. But it's a new way of thinking of the sin and punishment. In the day of Jesus, if somebody had some kind of disease, a man was brought to the disciples that was born blind, and they said, who sinned? Who caused this problem? The man or his parents? Somebody sinned, and this is the result. And what Jesus basically said, he gave a spiritual reset. It doesn't matter who sinned, who did anything wrong. What matters is what we do now. And he commanded the young man to see, I'm not getting my stories mixed up, but the healing occurred, in other words, because he was saying, let's think differently here. Let's not chain the experience this young man's having with something he did in the past. And that's also karma, the law of karma. You've got to pay the price. You've got to pay for what you've done in the past. There's a lot of thought tied into that idea that your life is an exact reflection of what you think. The way you experience your life is the way you think. And the different conditions that occur, they just are conditions, and you decide what you're going to do with those. But the moment we blame ourselves or blame somebody for the condition they're in, and whether we blame somebody or not, that's none of our business. The only thing that we're affected by is our own thinking. The song that we sing, we make our own world. That's what it is. It's not speaking of the world outside of ourselves. It's speaking of the inner world. That's our life. And so when Jesus said, it doesn't matter if the young man sinned or the parents, let's break that chain of logic. Because the presence of God is here. The power to change is here. And that's a whole different way of thinking. Because we can really get into that. Who did it? Whose fault is it? Is it me or is it someone else? We prefer when it's somebody else. That way we can be the victim. We can suffer for a real long time if we have no control over that. But again, even if it is somebody else that hurts us or tries to hurt us, we're still making a choice to have our experience. And we're making a choice to have a certain level of experience. And if we don't like that level, when will it change? When that person apologizes? Well, what if they don't? Are we forever stuck in that negative state? Or do we give our power over to somebody else? And that's often what happens. And it's such a common thing to do that we don't even think it's wrong. We don't think there's anything wrong with it. But that's why we are stepping upon a path that is different, because it requires full responsibility for what is going on up here and how we're dealing with our own power, our own, the making of our own choices. And if we accept that responsibility, it's not easy. But we can do something at all times about our life, because our life is our thought and our emotion. And if we're not in charge of it, then who is? And that's what we always want to come back to. The saying of Jesus contains a spiritual gem that can help us reset and begin again. I am the way, the truth, and the life. If you think of these words arising from your own spiritual center, your central I, you get an idea of why they can help at a time of confusion and uncertainty. Think of your own I am as the axle that holds the spinning wheel of your external life. At your center, you are always at rest, regardless of how fast or how slow your life seems to be moving. I've shared this with you before, this illustration, and actually this talk, although the talk always comes out differently. I was running a little bit dry this week, so I started looking at some of my past presentations, and this one made sense to talk about today. But you think of the spinning wheel and the center axle that stays the same all the time, and you get out in that spinning wheel and you can get pretty dizzy. When I was growing up, we would go to my grandparents' home in Evers, Kansas, which is a very tiny, tiny little town. And there was a playground nearby that had one of those merry-go-rounds that you push, spin kids around on that. We would ride that thing, and when you're on it, if you survive staying on it, because I had some brothers that could push it pretty fast and would do everything possible to throw us off, but you get off of it and you can't walk straight. You know, life is really difficult for a few moments. You're so dizzy. And you think about that when you're dealing with your life in a circumstantial way, the circumstances in your life, trying to manipulate everything. That can be pretty dizzying. You try to get this fire out over here, and another one pops up over there, and it's like trying to explain to one of my cats that I don't want you up in the ceiling of the garage and getting in the insulation. And I was very clear with her about this, that I don't want you climbing up there. I don't think it's healthy for you, and I don't want our insulation messed up. But she didn't listen. She just keeps going up there. Well, Beth and I went out and rearranged the garage furniture so she can't get up there. So she is no longer going up there. But sometimes you can't tell life what to do. You've got to take other kinds of action that stops that. In our personal case, the action always has to do with our perception, with how we're seeing the thing. And so the way to see it differently is to let go of that spinning, that merry-go-round, that problem that's outside, and get to the center of that merry-go-round that we call life. And we are that center. That's the beauty of this whole thing, is the answer that we seek is always present. And it's a matter of making the choice to access it. And how do we access it? By trying to stop the merry-go-round, or by getting off of the merry-go-round? And the answer is to get off. Does that mean we don't pay attention to our life and what's going on and all the responsibilities we have? No, it doesn't. But wouldn't you rather deal with your life from a sane place rather than an insane place, a reactive place? Your center of power rather than the weakness of feeling you don't have the resources to deal with the change or whatever you're dealing with in your life. It's important to reconnect with this stable, unmoving part of yourself, to withdraw for a time from all of your efforts to spin the wheel and surrender to the healing action of your guiding source. So that's the easiest and most difficult thing to do all at once. It's all wrapped up in one thing. When I have a problem, you want to run out, you want to take your fire extinguisher, your hammer or axe or whatever you have to take to fix it. You want to attack the problem, to get it to stop, to get it fixed. When so often, in fact, every single time, now you may take your fire extinguisher and all that out later, but seek first the kingdom, and all the proper responses will be added. That's in the Bible someplace, not in those exact words, but Jesus said that. Seek first the kingdom, and all these other things will be taken care of. What's that mean? Find your center of power. Do a spiritual reset. And why do I say it's the hardest thing? You know already why it's the hardest thing, because we can't seem to stop that merry-go-round. We can't get off of it. We don't like it, but for some reason we cling to it just as hard as we can. The best thing that could happen is if the merry-go-round threw us off, and then we get our bearings back and we find our center of strength. But it's important to reconnect with this stable, unmoving part of yourself, to withdraw for a time from all of your efforts to spin the wheel, or to keep the wheel under control, let's say that, and surrender to the healing action of your guiding source. It's easy to forget that you desire the greater good because you're responding to that still small voice of spirit. God is your source, has urged you this far, and will continue to guide you each step of the way. Remember, I am with you always. See, one thing you can't run away from is yourself. And for some people, that will seem like a negative statement. I wish I could get away from myself. That seems to be what we're trying to do so often. We're trying to get away from the self that is vulnerable, without realizing the self that we really want to reconnect with is the soul. It's the true essence of our being. It's that center hub that is not spinning with the rest of the world. It is still, be still and know that I am God. And that's not saying I personally am God, but my spiritual center is an expression of that same essence that is God. It's the pail of water taken out of the ocean. It's one and the same thing in lesser degree. But that presence is always with me. So my choice is, do I continue to struggle with the changes or with the things I don't like in life? Or do I find that center of power? And do I hold that? It's not holding a thought. We want to have an actual experience. We want to find that place, that center of peace, where we actually let go and we know everything's okay. And we will know what to do next. Surrender and trust to the all-knowing, all-loving presence of God within you. Right where you are, open yourself to knowing that every step you take is the right step, that you are now being guided and protected in ways that will soon be perfectly clear. And hasn't that occurred in every unknown situation in your life? Could we be here today if that had not been true? Life always resolves itself. It always presents that stepping stone. Like in the Indiana Jones movie at the end or at some point where he's walking across the big chasm and he can't see the bridge, but it manifests with every step he takes. I always like that imagery. But we are very much in the same kind of thing. We're spiritual beings, eternal beings that have, I believe, made the choice to be here. I think we understood the problems with being here. And so we do not want to forget that the reason I came here is because I knew I could solve the problems. I knew I'd be okay. So it's a matter of coming back, pulling back within ourselves and knowing that's true. So we all have something to do this week. I'm sure everyone in here has something going on that you would rather not have going on, but is going on. So let's just ask ourselves, how will we do this? Do we continue on in the old traditional way, or do we do a spiritual reset? Okay. Thank you for watching this week's program. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with others. We want to reach as many people as we can, and we appreciate your help. If you'd like to help support this ministry, just click the donate card at the top right-hand corner of your screen. Your financial support means a lot to us. We have many subjects in our video lineup, so feel free to take a look. If there's a topic you don't see and would like me to address, just put it in the comment section. I'd love to know what's on your mind. To subscribe to this channel, simply click our logo. Thanks again for your interest in Independent Unity, and have a wonderful week.